Welcome back to World History Explore. We are turning back a few of the pages of Norway's history. It is a tale carved into the Scandinavian peninsula, sharing its stage with Sweden and Finland. Its landscapes are like pages from a dramatic novel: steep mountains, deep fjords, and a coastline that stretches over 25,000 kilometers. Every twist and turn of this rugged terrain tells a story. But how has this geography shaped the people who call it home? The answer lies in the journey through time, and journey through the eras that shaped the land of the midnight sun. So without any further ado, let's begin. Survival amid the ice. Let's start with the earliest settlers, arriving around 10,000 BC when the Ice Age finally loosened its grip. These hunter-gatherers ventured into a harsh land newly freed from glaciers. Armed with primitive tools and unshakable resilience, they thrived by hunting, fishing, and foraging. Temporary shelters and caves became their homes, offering refuge against unforgiving elements. They weren't just surviving, they were adapting, proving that even in the bleakest of settings, life finds a way. Fast forward to 4000 BC, and Norway enters the Neolithic period. This was no small step, it was a leap. Farming began to take root, literally. Small communities sprang up along the fertile coastal valleys, where the land was kinder. The cultivation of crops and domestication of animals transformed their way of life. Trade networks blossomed, linking these early Norwegians to their European neighbors. Norway was no longer just isolated tundra, it was becoming a part of something bigger. Jump to around 800 AD and the Viking Age storms onto the scene. This wasn't just a period, it was a seismic shift. Norway's fjords, once silent witnesses to time, now launched sleek longships into the unknown. These weren't just raiders, they were explorers and settlers. From the British Isles to Iceland, Greenland, and even North America, the Norsemen carved out a legacy that would echo through history. It was during this time, in 872, that Harald Fairhair united Norway under one crown after his victory at the Battle of Haversfjord. Before Harald, Norway was a patchwork of small kingdoms, each ruled by ambitious chieftains. His triumph didn't just consolidate power, it laid the foundation for a nation. Under his reign, the seeds of centralized governance and Christianity were sown, uniting the people culturally and spiritually. But the Vikings weren't just about conquest, they were master traders, connecting Scandinavia to Europe and beyond. Norse settlements, like those in Dublin and Novgorod, became hubs of commerce. Their ships didn't just carry weapons, they carried furs, amber, and iron, weaving Norway into a global tapestry of trade. The fjords, formed by ancient glaciers, served as both barriers and gateways. They isolated communities, fostering a unique cultural homogeneity, but they also opened paths to exploration. The northern regions, home to the indigenous Sami people, added depth to Norway's cultural narrative. Their traditions, centered around reindeer herding, remain a vital thread in the fabric of Norwegian identity. Even today, Norway's dramatic landscapes still attract millions of visitors. And speaking of visitors, if you're new here, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and like the video. The fjords, those stunning sculptures of ice and rock, remind us of the resilience and creativity of the people who have called this place home for centuries. The Cross and the Crown. The Middle Ages in Norway, from 1066 to 1537, were nothing short of dramatic. This was an era of sweeping transformations. Religion, population, and politics all took center stage. But beneath the surface of these shifts, a story of resilience and reinvention unfolded. By the 11th century, Norway's pagan gods were losing their grip. Kings like Håkon the Good and Olav Tryggvason had laid the groundwork, but it was Olav Haraldsson, later Saint Olav, who sealed the deal. He didn't just preach, he acted. Olav tore down pagan temples, enforced church laws, and built Christian churches, making sure that the Norse gods faded into legends. Then came the Battle of Stiklestad in 1030. Olav fought fiercely but fell, yet his death was no defeat. Martyrdom elevated him to sainthood, and his legacy ignited a nationwide embrace of Christianity. By 1152, the establishment of the Nidaros Archdiocese in Trondheim crowned the Church's power, linking religion with monarchy. Norway was no longer just a collection of territories, it was a Christian kingdom. As the church bells rang, the population boomed. By 1300, Norway's numbers had swelled from 150,000 to 400,000. This growth was fueled by better farming, improved tools, and even new crops. Towns like Bergen became bustling hubs, drawing in traders and farmers. Peace under rulers like Håkon Håkonsson helped too. His reign was a golden age, marked by stability and prosperity. But as the saying goes, calm seas don't last forever. When death knocked. In 1349, Norway faced its darkest chapter. The Black Death swept in through trade routes, sparing no one. Within a year, 2/3 of the population was gone. By 1400, the plague's aftershocks had halved the survivors. Entire villages were abandoned. Feudal lords lost their lands, and those left alive, peasants and laborers, found themselves in demand. Wages rose, and a new social order began to emerge. Ironically, the very plague that shattered society also gave survivors a chance to rebuild. The church, already powerful, grew even more as people turned to faith amidst the chaos. Yet its inability to stop the plague sparked quiet doubt. Was divine power truly infallible? By 1397, Norway's leaders sought strength in unity, or so it seemed. The Kalmar Union, orchestrated by Queen Margaret I, joined Norway, Denmark, and Sweden under a single monarch. On paper, it was brilliant. United laws, combined armies, and a stronger front against enemies. But reality was messy. Swedish nobles rebelled, Norway's voice grew weaker, and Denmark tightened its grip. Norwegians began to feel like second-class partners in their own alliance. The Union promised strength, but often delivered frustration. Norway's Middle Ages were a crucible of transformation. Christianity replaced the old gods, a population surge set the stage for urban growth, and the Black Death tore it all apart before offering new beginnings. Politically, alliances like the Kalmar Union reshaped Norway's identity. This period wasn't just about survival, it was about defining a nation. These centuries set the stage for the Norway we know today, resilient, determined, and ever-evolving. A kingdom subdued. The early modern period in Norway, stretching from 1537 to 1814, was a roller coaster of upheaval, transformation, and resilience. It was a time when Norway lost its footing as an equal partner in the Nordic political landscape and found itself grappling with a new identity under the shadow of Danish dominance. In 1537, King Christian III of Denmark marched into Norway and claimed it as his own during the chaos of the Count's feud. This wasn't a handshake agreement or a friendly merger. It was a takeover, plain and simple. Gone was Norway's equal status in the Kalmar Union, replaced by a subordinate role in the Dano-Norwegian Union. Copenhagen became the epicenter of power, with Norwegian decisions made by Danish rulers who often overlooked Norwegian interests. While Norway retained its laws and local assemblies, these remnants of autonomy were little more than symbolic. The Danish royal law of 1665 solidified the king's absolute authority, turning Norway into a puppet state. To make matters worse, Danish culture infiltrated every corner of Norwegian life. Danish became the language of the elite, the courts, and education. Over time, this led to a cultural erosion that left Norwegians questioning their own identity. As if losing autonomy wasn't enough, 1537 also marked Norway's forced embrace of Lutheranism. Christian III wasn't just a conqueror, he was a reformer on a mission. By dismantling the Catholic Church, confiscating its lands, and establishing a Lutheran state church, the king killed two birds with one stone. He expanded royal coffers and consolidated his control over Norwegian society. But this wasn't just about religion. The Reformation redefined social order in Norway. With monasteries dissolved and Latin scripture replaced by vernacular Bible readings, education began to shift. For better or worse, this religious transformation aligned Norway with Europe's Protestant movements while rooting it deeper in the Dano-Norwegian fold. As the years rolled on, Norway's autonomy slipped further away. Copenhagen treated Norway as little more than a resource hub, draining its wealth to fuel Denmark's wars and ambitions. Norway's trade routes, particularly through the lucrative Øresund Strait, lined Danish pockets while leaving Norwegians to bear the economic strain. The nobility in Norway fared no better. Once powerful landowners, they saw their influence fade as the crown centralized authority over land and resources. By the late 17th century, Norway wasn't just ruled by Denmark, it was being swallowed whole, culturally and economically. Yet even under Denmark's shadow, a spark of Norwegian resilience endured. Lutheranism brought a sense of unity, but it also planted seeds of national identity. As Norwegians struggled against cultural and political domination, they began to see themselves not as Danes, but as something distinctly different. By the time the Treaty of Kiel ended Danish rule in 1814, Norway was no longer content to play the subordinate. Though the treaty handed Norway to Sweden, it also ignited a fierce longing for independence. That same year, Norway declared its own constitution, signaling the beginning of a new era. The early modern period wasn't just about loss and control, it was about endurance. Norway endured the weight of Danish rule, the upheaval of the Reformation, and the exploitation of its resources. Yet, through it all, the foundations of a national identity emerged, one that would drive its fight for sovereignty in the years to come. This period, though tumultuous, was the crucible that forged modern Norway's unyielding spirit. The road to self-rule. Norway's fight for independence in 1814 wasn't just a series of historical events, it was a story of resilience, defiance, and the yearning for self-rule. It all began with the Treaty of Kiel, signed on January 14, 1814. This treaty ended more than 400 years of Danish-Norwegian union, transferring Norway from Denmark to Sweden like a piece of property. Can you imagine the outrage? Norwegians, proud and determined, refused to accept being treated like a herd of cattle. The treaty was part of the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars. Denmark, allied with Napoleon, found itself on the losing side. As a result, King Frederick VI of Denmark handed over Norway to Sweden to settle political scores. But Norway wasn't about to stay silent. The man who would spearhead their rebellion was Christian Frederick, Denmark's vice-regent in Norway. Refusing to bow to Swedish rule, he declared himself regent and called for a bold step, a constitutional assembly. On April 10, 1814, a group of determined Norwegian representatives gathered at Eidsvoll to shape their future. Over the next few weeks, they drafted one of Europe's most progressive constitutions. By May 17th, Norway had declared independence, laying down principles of governance that included the separation of powers and civil liberties. Christian Frederick was crowned King of Norway, sending a clear message: Norway would not surrender its identity. But Sweden wasn't going to sit idle. By late July, Crown Prince Charles John of Sweden led his forces into Norway, determined to enforce the Treaty of Kiel. The Swedish-Norwegian War was brief but intense. Norwegian troops fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. After 2 weeks, Norway agreed to peace talks, leading to the Convention of Moss on August 14, 1814. The Convention of Moss was a compromise. Norway kept its hard-won constitution, but it had to enter into a union with Sweden under a shared monarch. Though their independence was curtailed, Norwegians retained control over their internal governance, preserving the democratic ideals they had fought for. This union with Sweden lasted nearly a century, from 1814 to 1905. While Norway maintained its own parliament and domestic autonomy, tensions simmered. National pride grew stronger as Norwegians pushed back against Swedish dominance. This period planted the seeds of a full independence movement that would finally succeed in the early 20th century. 1814 wasn't just about treaties, wars, and unions. It was a pivotal moment when Norway declared to the world, "We are not to be handed over or silenced." Their determination didn't just shape a nation, it ignited a legacy of resilience and pride still celebrated today. A bold leap. What does it take for a small country to carve its identity on the world stage? For Norway, the journey from 1905 to the present has been nothing short of transformative. In 1905, Norway made a daring move. After nearly a century of uneasy union with Sweden, the cracks became impossible to ignore. The spark? Norway's push for its own consular service. Sweden's King Oscar II refused, but Norway wasn't backing down. On June 7, 1905, the Norwegian parliament declared the union dissolved. The message was clear: Norway wanted its freedom. But would the people agree? A referendum on August 13, 1905, gave a resounding answer. Out of 368,000 votes, only 184 opposed independence. The people had spoken, and their voices thundered across Scandinavia. By September 23, the Karlstad Treaty made it official. Sweden acknowledged Norway's sovereignty, and on November 18, Prince Karl of Denmark took the throne as King Haakon VII, symbolizing Norway's fresh start as a constitutional monarchy. The fires of war. Freedom came with challenges. During World War I, Norway clung to neutrality, but it wasn't easy. Maritime trade routes made the country vulnerable, and economic hardships hit hard. Still, Norway weathered the storm, emerging intact. Then came World War II, and neutrality wasn't enough to keep the Nazis at bay. On April 9, 1940, Germany invaded, dragging Norway into 5 years of brutal occupation. The government fled to London, but resistance flourished at home. Ordinary Norwegians sabotaged Nazi operations and aided the Allies. When the war ended in May 1945, Norway emerged battered but unbroken, its national pride stronger than ever. The post-war years marked the dawn of a new era. Norway wasn't content with survival, it aimed for prosperity. The discovery of North Sea oil in the late 1960s transformed the economy. From a struggling post-war nation, Norway rose to become one of the richest countries in Europe. But wealth wasn't just for the elite. Norway built a welfare state like no other. Universal health care, free education, and social security became the pillars of a society that valued equality over privilege. This was no accident. It was a deliberate choice to build a fair and inclusive nation. Progress wasn't limited to economics. Norway championed women's suffrage as early as 1913, making it one of the first countries to grant women the right to vote. This wasn't just a victory for women, it was a leap forward for democracy. Norway was signaling to the world that equality mattered, and it wasn't afraid to lead the charge. Norway's modern history is a tale of independence, resilience, and unity. From breaking free of Sweden's shadow to standing tall after war, the country's journey is a testament to its people's strength. The welfare state and democratic values that define Norway today didn't come easy. They were earned through struggle and determination. Even now, every step forward is rooted in this history. Norway's past isn't just a story, it's a living legacy that shapes its future. And that, perhaps, is what makes this small nation so remarkable. And that's the incredible journey of Norway, resilient, proud, and ever-evolving. From the icy wilderness of its earliest settlers to its bold steps toward independence, Norway's story is one of grit and triumph. If you found this exploration fascinating, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. There's always more history waiting to be uncovered, and you won't want to miss it. What other country's tales should we dive into next? Drop your ideas in the comments and let's explore together. Until next time, thanks for watching World History Explored.